What's up, WBE fans? It's your friend Choice CJ here. Welcome to another week of the Pickems. I am your host, and I am, of course, joined by my good pal, General Tarheel. What's up, Ben?
What is good, everyone? Always glad to be back and bringing y'all some amazing content for the WBE. I am truly loving Pickems and making these videos with my friend CJ this season.
Aw, shucks, you shouldn't have said that. You're too kind. I love you, Ben.
I hope I'm making you blush.
Last week, of course, was week 7. We had a great set of games last week. A lot of our favorite teams squaring off. A couple of really good contenders squaring off, like the game between Kelly and Envy. We also had a couple of big upsets last week. Why don't you tell us about a few of those, Ben?
Well, easily the most noticeable upset from last week is the Melbourne Rotoms and Cybertron versus the Pittsburgh Pirates and Old Man Tup. Tup picking up his first win versus the Melbourne Rotoms and upsetting all of the analysts. Only around 24-20 actually went with Old Man Tup, and the fans were off too. So that was almost a clean sweep in favor of the Melbourne Rotoms, but Tup was able to prove everyone wrong and pick up his first win of the season, which was very nice. As well as another upset that kind of caught people off guard was the Durham Druddigons and 6-Foot Hacks going against the Bristol City Blazikens and Game Boy Luke. Luke did pick up that match versus Leo and really just did pretty well with Togen and Mario in that match in general. Was able to pick it up and throw a few analysts off guard. Majority of the analysts did go in favor of Leo, but the fans at home and as well as a few other analysts decided to go with the Blazikens, so they did call that dub, so good on your guys' part, but those are easily by far the most major upsets I'd have to say for last week's DJ. And looking into the records for the overall analysts in last week, we had our highest record being the fans actually at 12-2, and for the analysts we had 11-3 for Chris Selke, while most of the analysts were tied around 9-5 and 10-4. While I am actually still the overall leader for the Pickems score at 75-23, and you guys at home are doing 53-17, which is doing pretty well.
Yeah, it was a rough week for Uzi Gunner. He and you had been neck and neck for most of the season, but with an 8-6 week, he kind of fell back a little bit. So the fans might end up with the best overall winning percentage if they can keep up this sort of 12-2 pace. They might end up even eclipsing you, Ben.
Chill. I mean, they're doing a great job. Don't get me wrong, but that's my first place.
All right, Ben's very confident that he's going to finish this season on top. If you guys want to vote for the picks each week, we recommend you go to the Twitter page for the WBE, follow that, and usually on Tuesdays we end up tweeting out polls for each game, and you guys can vote for who you think will win each matchup. So make sure you check that out. Now, without further ado, let's move on to our set of games for week number 8. We're going to kick things off with the matchup between the Atlanta Umbreons, coached by Fanatax, and his opponent is Kelly Under the Radar, coach of the Maryland Terrapins. Now, I think that this matchup is a little bit tough for Kelly. I think overall it is going to be favoring Christian and the Umbreons. Mega Gardevoir just looks incredibly threatening this game. Kelly, not that his team is fat or passive, but he does have a lot of mons that are kind of slow. And so Gardevoir, with its base 100 speed stat, is going to be able to really damage a lot of those mons. It doesn't need a lot of coverage besides just Hyper Voice. You'll probably want Focus Blast or HP Ground or something to hit the Stack Attacka. And so I think it's going to change Kelly's building a little bit. He's going to have to go with a very offensive build this week in order to combat that Gardevoir. One thing to also look out for, I think the Double Dragon setup is potentially very threatening from Fanatax and his team. Flygon and Dragonite, if they just both have Dragon Stab and then probably go with EQ in a second slot, can pretty much hit everything. Maybe you put a coverage move for Wigglytuff onto there to hit that thing as hard as possible. But yeah, you can use one of those Pokemon to pave the way for the other. So Dragonite can potentially wall break Wigglytuff, use a Z-Fly set to do tremendous damage to it, and even if the Dragonite goes down, basically then it's in range of dying to +1 EQ from Flygon. So I think that's a potentially very good win con. Things that are good on Kelly's side this week, I actually like Sub's Leech Seed Superior quite a bit. Just with the simple coverage of Leaf Storm and Dragon Pulse, should be able to beat basically everything. I guess Fortress and Durant technically wall that, but neither of them are very good on the special defensive side. And yeah, like that's what Leech Seed is for being able to wear down those mons quite a bit, since they're going to take a lot of residual over the course of the battle if they get that Leech Seed up. So I wonder if he'll bring something like that, or if he'll try and go, like I said, with a more offensive build, like maybe like a Scarf Serp with like Dragon Pulse to try and revenge kill the Flygon or the Dragonite. I don't know if that's the best use of Serp this week, but he might be forced into it. And then the other mon that I think is really good on Kelly's side is Mesprit. Because there's no Dark type on the Umbreon side, you could potentially run a Rest Hawk set with Calm Mind and Mono Psyshock. I think that would be very scary. The only major threat to it is the Durant. Maybe you can wear that down before you bring in the Mesprit. The only other thing that's going to be able to beat the Mesprit at that point is Taunt on Mega Gardevoir or on Tornadus. All things considered, I am going to be going in favor of Kelly this matchup. And I think that's what a lot of our analysts and fans are going to be going for. Only Dissenter is going to be Cressel Key. Looks like you're going in favor of Kelly as well, Ben.
It's hard to go up against Kelly, man, honestly, especially when he is a newly engaged man. Very happy for Kelly in that for his real life. He,
absolutely.
Proposed to Melissa recently. Guys, make sure to give him some congrats on Twitter or on YouTube for his next video when you see this versus the Umbreons. He'd definitely appreciate it. I know he's very happy right now. But apart from that, he's always been doing pretty well this battle. I do feel like it's going to be annoying for a few things, like to break the team, but Superior, I feel like you said, could be pretty annoying for the Umbreons. They could benefit from that, but just looking at Mega Gardevoir in this matchup, it's definitely going to be an issue, because that thing just likes to click buttons, and if it can land a Focus Blast versus Stack Attacker, or if even it can honestly just run HP Fighting versus it, it's going to be a little bit of a threat. For the next match this week, we have the Melbourne Rotoms, coached by Cybertron, going up against the Miami Dolphins, Kyle A. For this week, Rotom Heat's having a pretty nice offensive pressure against the rain side of Kyle's team, while also checking on a more bulky side to the sun part of Kyle's weather team. The Melbourne Rotoms do have a difficult time, though, breaking Cresselia, especially if it is paired with a Spadef Heal Bell Diancie. Of course, to get rid of any potential Toxic install that the Melbourne Rotoms want to do, because they do have a kind of a bulkier team, as well as Diancie just being a proper check to a Selgor in the back, so you really don't have to like try and force Cresselia to take a Buzz, which is going to hurt a lot. But if you bring Calm Mind and Cresselia, it might just have a chance to do pretty well versus the Rotoms, in all honesty. So they have to be pretty aware of that and prep for that properly. It'd be kind of unfortunate for Cybertron to lose 2 weeks in a row to teams that didn't have a win yet into the season. So hopefully you can watch out for that. But a mixed Kingdra is also going to be kind of a decent threat for the Miami Dolphins going up the Rotoms, because you're able to hit Blissey on the physical side, as well as hit like Aromatisse and the Mega Slowbro on the special side, so you have to be aware of that. Overall, I do think it's a difficult matchup for the Melbourne Rotoms, but I can't vote in favor of the Dolphins because they do not have a win so far this season. And like I already mentioned, even though it's like a scenario last week for the Melbourne Rotoms, I do believe that Cybertron is still going to be able to pull it out versus the Dolphins. While for the votes, it is a clean sweep across the board. All the analysts voting in favor of the Melbourne Rotoms, and you guys at home also voting in favor of the Rotoms. CJ, you want to tell me why you decided to go with Cybertron this week?
Yeah, it's basically coming down to the fact that Kyle's unfortunately 0-7. But as you pointed out, that didn't stop Aaron from dropping an L last week versus another winless team. So Cybertron is one of my favorite content creators. I've watched a lot of his like PowerPoint videos on how to get into VGC, and I think they're very high quality. From a Draft League perspective, like, it's really interesting because he's like had some moments of brilliance, but has just also been very inconsistent. So he's like very frustrating to try and pick his matches because you never know how he's gonna do. So I'm nervous about this one, but I'm still gonna be picking him against Kyle A. Now let's hop into our next matchup. It is going to be a good one between the Pittsburgh Piratas, coached by Old Man Tup. His opponent, of course, is going to be the Bullet Punch Club, coached by the Uzi Gunner. So Uzi is in a pretty good position where he actually has a couple of pretty good Zarda X checks. Tapu Fini and Rhyperior both are pretty nice because they can take both of the stabs relatively well, especially Tapu Fini. And the fact that Tapu Fini, of course, is going to be setting up that Misty Terrain means that some of the alternative Zard sets that you might like to run in this sort of situation, like lure sets with Will-O-Wisp or Toxic, are not going to be effective because you can't land those while the Misty Terrain is up. So it's crazy to say that Zardex might actually sit on the bench this game. We'll have to see. If he's looking for a different win con, I like a Calm Mind Musharna quite a bit, with Mono Psyshock, and then the last coverage slot being Heal Bell. Heal Bell means that he's not going to be able to wear it down with something like Toxic, like Uzi can throw it off with his Uxie or his Arcanine or whatever, but he's not going to be able to beat that in the long run unless he somehow stalls it out. So that if I were Tup, that's what I would do. On Uzi's side, there's a couple of good mons. Arrow overall is pretty scary, except for maybe Klefki. Like, you just run the stabs plus EQ plus Ice Fang, and it pretty much kills everything with sufficient chip. You could even potentially drop Ice Fang for something like Hone Claws if you want to get up some boosts. If you boost up your Stone Edge, you might have enough power to break through Gliscor in the long run, especially because Gliscor doesn't have an amazing way to hit Aerodactyl. It's obviously immune to EQ. It resists Aerial Ace. It resists Facade. Gliscor would otherwise be forced to run some sort of rock move to hit the Aerodactyl. So that could be a good way to go for Uzi. Another good Mon, he brought this 2 weeks ago versus Patty Trails, and it did quite well. He could bring a sub Kyurem, and I like that quite a bit just because it can set up subs very easily on things like Rotom Wash, probably on non-offensive variants of Roserade, things like that. You definitely want Dragon Pulse and Earth Power to break through the majority of the team. The last slot, it's a question of do you run Ice Beam or Roost. Ice Beam is going to be the best way to hit Gliscor. Without it, you might not be able to break it down. It's hard to say. So I am going to be going in favor of Uzi and the Bullet Punch Club in this match. If you've noticed, since taking over for Sacred, Uzi actually hasn't dropped a match yet. So he's had a very good showing, and while Tup did finally begin his season turnaround last week with a dub, I think that Uzi is the safer bet in this match. It's looking like the analysts and fans agree, and you're also leaning in favor of Uzi.
He's just been doing so well so far, kicking off his season, rocking 2-0 now, I believe, with his games. He's been doing pretty well with Mega Arrow and such, and if Charizard has that bad of a matchup, it's kind of hard to go in favor of Tup's team. He does have some decent mons, but it's really just difficult for him to, honestly, just wall break and kind of like get a sweep or potential, stuff like that. Like, Zard is a big factor in the offensive presence of Tup's team, because some of it's just lacking overall. And especially when you want to bring a decent amount of defensive checks versus Uzi's team, it's pretty difficult for them there. So yeah, I had to go in favor of Uzi Gunner as well this week. In the next match, we have the Seattle Sea Kings, coached by Jodor, going up against the San Diego Chimchars and Lord Envy. Victini can be a big issue in this matchup, especially for the Sea Kings' passive walls. I can definitely see an item on Victini such as Weakness Policy, kind of abusing Alamomolo's Weak Scald, or if the Umbreon wants to use like Foul Play, it can also benefit from that. So using those passive walls is like a very strong setup for Victini. Could be pretty dangerous. It's just going to put in plenty of work in all honesty. There's very few things that can also revenge the Victini. You might really just want to try to like get in a 50-50 between Sucker Punch and Pursuit Trap, or just bring a Scarf Bishop in general to kind of catch him off guard and go for like a knockoff or something of the sort. But it's really kind of difficult for him to revenge because Infernape doesn't do too much. Yeah, you can bring Earthquake, with I guess is pretty helpful, but Togekiss switches into Infernape so well that's kind of difficult in general to revenge that. But also for Togekiss, there's honestly hardly anything stopping a Scarf Togekiss when it comes down to it. Sure, Umbreon could technically stand in front and try to get off Wish Protects, but Umbreon is not doing anything to Togekiss in the long run. As long as Envy plays it well, and if he gets quite a few flinches in his favor, I think Scarf Togekiss might just take it. You might need a Scarf Manectric just to be able to kind of watch out for that Togekiss or something of the sort, because that's going to be pretty dangerous. But in all honesty, Manectric does have a decent matchup for the team, especially if you bring like HP Ice to hit like that Sceptile as well as the Doug Trio. because when I'm looking at it, as long as you give it a Shed Shell, Manectric actually benefits your team more, because of course you're not getting trapped by that potential Dugtrio, which I feel like could be a nuisance this match purely because of Manectric and Infernape. So just being aware of that, I feel like Manectric could pivot the team pretty well, because also if there is no ground type or immunity in general, you're getting off nice chip versus the team. Apart from that, I think the best win con for the Sea Kings would honestly have to be Haxorus. You just have to really watch out for that Ditto, because that is a major threat. Because Haxorus, of course, does get like the Earthquake coverage for Registeel and the Poison Jab coverage for both Togekiss and Azumarill. So it does have potential, but I also don't know what else he's going to get, or too many things he'll get technically a free Dragon Dance versus, especially if he has like a Scarf Victini in the back, or if it is like a Sash Dugtrio. So there are a lot of counters, and the matchup honestly isn't that great. So I had to go in favor of the San Diego Chimchargers and Envy, and everyone except Dr. Slacking is also going in favor of the Chimchargers, while you guys at home also favored the Chimchargers and actually used it as your lock-in this week, as well as you, CJ, locking in for Lord Envy.
Yeah, you brought up exactly what I would have brought up. The fact that Togekiss can pretty much spam Air Slash makes this very difficult for Joe. The Manectric is there as a quote-unquote resist, but it's not that bulky, and you have to consider that Sceptile is there in the back with Lightning Rod, as well as Ditto being able to trace Lightning Rod and abuse that. So it's going to be pretty tricky. And Manectric just in general is easy to wear down with rocks, and if you want to like set up like a layer of T-Spikes or something with Drapion, like, yes, the Venu's there to absorb it, but, like, you could take advantage of Venu switch-ins. So, yeah, I think Envy's got a really nice matchup here. Let's go into our next game. This one's going to be between the New York Noibats, coached by Mewtwo fan Nate, and his opponent is the Florida Gators, coached by It's Gator. So, I said 2 weeks ago that Bulk Up Zeraora was looking really threatening in the match versus Leo, and Gator did end up bringing that, so I'm glad that I called that one correctly. I'm expecting potentially the Bulk Up Zeraora to come back once again to just do tons of damage versus the team. You put Drain Punch or Close Combat in that second slot, it's going to be able to deal massive damage to the best electric resists on Nate's team, so those being Steelix and Hydreigon, and it should do enough damage to Go-Goat that it won't be too much of a problem. Maybe you can even run like Fight Z with Close Combat to really break that thing down. Steelix, yeah, like it could potentially be an issue, but I think that that's relatively easy to wear down with Kangaskhan or Archeops. And then in general, I really like Heracross to Wall Break in this game. It outspeeds 6 of the 10 Mons on Nate's team, and it's not going to take too much damage from something like Lucario if it wants to go for like Close Combat. Obviously, the Heracross does resist that, so that's pretty good. Heatran is definitely under a lot of pressure this game. It has to deal with Nate's Swellow, which is very threatening, his Sylveon, which Nate has shown to be a big fan of, even bringing in some spicy sets like Work Up Baton Pass and things like that. Even Go-Goat to an extent, Heatran is pressured to deal with. I think on Nate's side, like all of those Mons I mentioned are threats, but the biggest threat probably is Setup Lucario. I like Steelium Z on that because Steelium Z allows it to potentially break through Celebi, Heracross, or Donphan. Maybe you run it with Double Dance and you put Memento on Dusknoir. Nate's also done that in the past to give some really good setup opportunities there. So maybe you like Agility if the situation calls for it, or you Swords Dance. Other cheeky options, Sylveon with Calm Mind and HP Ground pretty much beats everything on Gator's team. He doesn't have a Fairy Resist besides Heatran. Maybe you put Wish in the last slot to keep yourself healthy. And then the real outlier could potentially be Steelix. If you have like a Trick Room Slowking passing into Steelix, just Steelix's stabs are looking fairly good in this matchup, assuming there's the proper chip on Heracross, Keldeo, and Celebi. I'm going to be leaning in favor of Gator this game, just because he has been on a nice hot streak. He had a couple of rough games to start the season. He got beat by Patty Trails back in week 1, if you remember, sort of before he figured out his team. But he's come on very strong lately. I expect him to take this game versus Nate. The analysts and the fans are going largely in favor of Gator, except for Kriselke going for Nate. You and I are in agreement on this one, Ben.
Yeah, I actually had to lock in with Gator as well this week. It's just that Zeraora matchup is tremendous. Nate's honestly just could have lose to it. That's how I see it going into this week. it's going to be really difficult for him to deal with it. And also just Mega Hair just there to support and potentially just deal with that Mega Steelix perfectly fine. I just feel like it's going to be pretty difficult for Nate to deal with that. His offense pairs decently, but Gator makes just about all of his Pokemon pretty bulky to where you could definitely catch Nate off guard and not even have to make switches. And Nate sometimes does overpredict on the obvious bulk switch-ins. So I feel like Gator could capitalize on that and get just potentially a pretty easy week this week with Zorora. For the next match, we have the Chicago Cubchews, coached by Galactic Elliott, going up against the Bristol City Blazikens and Game Boy Luke. For this match, the Cubchews offense gets walled pretty easily, honestly, when it comes to the Bristol City Blazikens bulk, while their bulk isn't hard to break down either for the Cubchews. Scolipede is easily stopped, as well as the Ninetales are both easily stopped by Scizor. Chandelure is kind of stopped by Drampa, as well as like an AV Primarina if they wanted to go that route. And Hoopa is just absolutely walled by Scrafty, in all honesty. So I feel like it's going to be very difficult for the Cubchews to pull out just about anything in here. An offensive ICMZ Aerodactyl blows back the Cubchews so easily. With Stabs plus Substitute and of course Ice Fang with that ICMZ is going to easily revenge kill anything, and the Substitute allows it to avoid potential revenge killers in a Scarfer, as well as Scolipede, as long as you get that Substitute up before Scolipede is in, because you don't want to risk it subbing in your face as you sub, even though that's not really likely to happen, because Scolipede will just want to click Protect and likely get that speed boost. But if you're able to get that sub, then you're at least still an advantage. Constant Rocks and chip damage is easily going to wear down the Cubchews Pokemon and put them in a pretty poor position. Yes, you do have Spin and Serena, which is honestly decent this matchup, but it does just get Scizor in for free, which is honestly pretty annoying for the entire team for the Cubchews to deal with. Spin could also just be an issue if you do bring Delmise, which honestly just switches into Serena for almost free, especially if you're like Colbert and everything. So that's going to be a big issue for the team, where Hazards and Chip is just honestly constantly annoying. And it's really just hard for them to pack the overall coverage to deal with the bulk on the Bristol City Blazikens. They deal with it pretty well, and with the main offense and Arrow just being just about all you need once you have the bulky checks, deal with the overall offense and just wear it down over time, which is basically all I'm trying to get at right here, is that it's just a difficult matchup for the Cubchews to deal with. So for this week, I had to go in favor of the Bristol City Blazikens. For the analysts, majority actually went for the Bristol City Blazikens as well. The only analysts going in favor of the Cubchews were UCJ Aaron 2420, Chris Cobain, and It's Sock, as well as the fans at home decided to go with the Bristol City Blazikens and Luke as well.
Yeah, I see what you're saying about it being a tricky matchup. Truth be told, I didn't realize quite how well Luke was doing, especially coming off of that big win over Leo last week. He's in prime position in his division to make playoffs. I think Elliott, like, he's a little bit more experienced than Luke, and you look at the matchup, like, his offense, like, it is stopped pretty well by Scizor, but I think that Elliott has a couple of decent responses to Scizor, like Rotom being able to switch into the dual stabs, maybe throw off a Will-O-Wisp versus that thing, being able to wear it down with time is going to be pretty nice. Elliott, I'm hoping will find a way to catch this game and get one in the win column for himself. Our next game is going to be between the Durham Druddigons, coached by 6-Foot Hacks, aka Leo. His opponent is the Sin City Sizzlers, and their coach is Patty Trills. So Patty, I think by a lot of people's standards, has one of the greatest teams in the league, just with threats upon threats upon threats, like Zam and Lando T. Set up threats like Raibombi potentially being there. To deal with a lot of those options, I like a pretty specific Lopunny set. I like High Jump Kick, Ice Punch, then Fake Out plus Quick Attack. So the double priority is going to make it very good for dealing massive amounts of damage to Alakazam and Raibombi. Just because neither of those mons are very bulky on the physical side, and don't really have recourse for those priority options. Ice Punch is going to be there to do the most amount of damage to Lando T and then the Golbat, and then nothing else on the team resists High Jump Kick. So it's pretty spammable. The only kind of annoying thing is like the double Intimidate, but the nice thing is that Incineroar, you know, one of his Intimidate users is never going to be switching into Lopunny. The Lando responses, like from a defensive perspective, are pretty limited. Just because Leo doesn't have like really good ground resists. Like Cradily, being the grass type, is what you'd often look to as being like a good ground resist, like what's your grass type, but Cradily, of course, does not resist ground thanks to its secondary rock typing. Moltres is very vulnerable to getting hit by rock type coverage, being the other flying resist. So I think Leo will have to get creative. Like Bulky Manaphy or Bulky Savali are better options. I've even, I've talked to him a little bit about, like, Intimidate Tauros for dealing with Lando, and then, hitting that thing with an Ice Beam in retaliation. I've used that in mocks in the past to deal with Landos, so I think that's kind of cute. One kind of non-conventional approach would be to run Curse Muck this week. Like, Curse Muck is never going to win in a game versus a team with Lando T, but it does force a response. So maybe you run, like, Curse with Ice Punch, and then you weaken the Lando to the point where it can't win anymore. But I don't even know if that's going to work out, just because Muck is very heavily pressured by the likes of Mega Zam and Raibombi. So, yeah, it's going to be really hard to check that Lando. And his other win cons, like, aren't that amazing. Like, Manaphy with a Tail Glow set is not going to work out. It doesn't have enough coverage to run Z Rain Dance, and it's outsped naturally by Raichu. Trick Room Reuniclus is actually outsped by Pharaoh under Trick Room. Como-O is going to be vulnerable to that dual Intimidate. If he's looking for something more unconventional, like a Rain Dance Seismitoad actually looks nice with, like, Z Earth Power. That can break through potentially some of the checks to water types. So we'll have to see. Patty just has all those threats upon threats that I mentioned. But I think that Leo's battling experience is going to come out ahead here, and I'm going to be leaning in favor of him for this game. It's mostly going in favor of Leo amongst our analysts and fans as well. It's just Ron locking in Patty as he does every week. Which has not entirely paid off for him up to this point, but I respect the bold choice. But it looks like, yeah, you're leading in favor of Leo as well, Ben.
Yeah, when it came down to it, I was kind of torn 50-50 between them, but I couldn't go against Leo overall just based off of experience, in all honesty. Especially when, even though Patty has been doing very well this season, majority of his kills and pressure for his team has been lying in that Mega Alakazam. And in all honesty, this is probably the worst matchup he's had for Mega Zam so far. Alolan Muck being one of the best Psychic type checks in general. Of course, with the immunity and amazing Pursuit Trap and general Spadef Bulk. So having that, as well as even a potential Dark Savali if you really wanted to, as well as Reuniclus switching in majority of the time and getting off a Trick Room and being annoying, and you have Mega Lopunny's amazing priority checks, that just makes it really difficult for Zam. And since he's been doing so well with it, and it's kind of like his MVP overall in the league in general, I feel like he's just going to struggle this week versus Leo's team. Even if he does have those good counters and strong Earthquake spam with Lando, like you mentioned, it's just going to be pretty difficult. But Leo does have to be aware of his Mega Lopunny when it comes down to the double Rough Skin Rocky Helmet that he could definitely do. Not only do you have to watch out for the Intimidate, but Dredagon and Ferrothorn can definitely help weaken down Lopunny enough, as long as Patty is able to get the proper predictions on his moves, such as Fake Out and stuff, because, of course, you don't want to be switching to Ferrothorn on a high jump kick. That'd be a little painful. But definitely have to go in favor of Leo.
Right, yeah.
And in the next game, we have the LA Spikes, coached by Kay Craig, going up against the Newcastle Needle Kings and Patters. For this match, Spadef, Bulky, Thick, Fat Snorlax, and an Assault Vest Terrakion will help out very well for the Newcastle Needle Kings going up against the LA Spice is Sun Pressure, because typically the Spice will always have an amazing matchup when it comes to the Sun and do pretty well with it in battle as well. As long as Patters is aware of that and respects the Sun and brings proper checks, I feel like he'll be doing pretty fine. Even then, maybe Assault Vest isn't entirely necessary on Tarak. It just really helps versus the Mega Houndoom, especially if it does opt to carry the Solar Beam, which could be a little bit annoying. But Tarak itself has a very strong offensive matchup, like it normally does, because that thing is absolutely terrifying. The main thing, honestly, wanting to switch into it is not really existent, I'd want to say. You could try to get an Intimidate off with Mawile if you're coming in on a Stone Edge. Bulky Starmie you might want to just potentially keep for the Delphox specifically, and not really want to switch in too much on Terrakion, especially if you're taking a Stone Edge, because even though it can help out with the Tarak, Delphox and Sun is actually pretty scary, in all honesty, I'd have to say. It could put in a decent amount of work, especially if it's choice specs and it's just clicking moves. So if you're K-Cray, you do have to be aware of that and potentially bring the Bulky Starmie, while also having or saving Houndoom's Mega Evolution, so you have double immunities, of course, because you have Flash Fire with Houndoom before Evolution, and you have the Dark immunity versus Psychic Stab, just about always. But as long as you don't Mega Evolve, you're keeping that Fire immunity beforehand. Scarf Magnezone is also going to be a gigantic pain for the Nidokings, in my opinion, especially if it's going to be getting those electric terrain boosts. Especially with Analytic, if you just bring, not even Scarf, if you bring Choice Specs and Hippowdon comes in on Choice Specs Magnezone, I'm pretty sure it's getting 2-shot, especially with Analytic. So you have to be aware of that, and I feel like it's just going to be pretty annoying for the team in general. You could also bring Magapult to Trappist Cavalier, and Hidden Power is definitely going to KO, especially if you do get that Sun boost. But overall, it's going to be doing plenty of damage. Just a nice check to Coco in general. You do have to be aware of that Hidden Power Ground, which is pretty obvious in this matchup. But apart from that, I feel like it's going to be putting in plenty of work, in all honesty. And even though the matchup is, I feel like, kind of favored toward the LA Spice, I had to go in favor of the Newcastle Nidokings and Patters. Pretty split between all the analysts, in all honesty. I'd say, it looks about 50-50. While you guys at home decide to go in favor of the Newcastle Nidokings as well. CJ, you want to tell me why you decided to go with K-Cray this week?
Yeah, you brought up a lot of good points about the positive aspects of the matchup for K this week. There's a few sets that I'm expecting, like Sugarberry Magnezone is a pretty solid check to Coco this game. Being able to lure that and then hit it with an analytic HP ground of its own. So I like that. Sun Boosted Houndoom just is so freaking good this game. It's unbelievable. The best check to Sun Boosted Houndoom probably going to be that Snorlax. But I'm not even sure if it can take like 2 solar powered Dark Pulses. If it's like a bulky set, we'll have to see how that one goes. P2 just in general is besides Terrakion is annoying to have to deal with for Patters. So it could definitely go either way. Like clearly the votes amongst our analysts and fans are showing that. But I'm thinking K might pull what could be considered an upset here. The next game is going to be a nice and classic matchup between the New Orleans Pelippers, coached by Pokemon, aka John, and his opponent is going to be the Minnesota Vikavolt, coached by A-Drive. These two guys have been dueling back and forth for the better part of 3 years or 4 years now in so many different leagues, GBA, P4G, you name it. I'm really looking forward to watching this one. There's some really cool threats on both sides. I think that there's a lot of wall breaking potential with a mixed Life Orb Salamence this week. So I would run literally both Outrage and Draco Meteor. And then probably in the last 2 slots run Iron Tail and Fire Blast. So those 2 moves, Fire Blast and Iron Tail, are going to break down the 2 best responses to Salamence, being Skarmory and Florges. And then if you run the double Dragon move, you can very easily break through some kind of fat mons like Gastrodon or Venusaur who might think that they could take on a Salamence. I think that would be a really cheeky way to wear down Dan's team. A potential partner for that sort of wall-breaking Mence could actually be a Life Orb Toxicroak. This sounds really cheeky, but I think a workup set with double priority would be really good. So you have Sucker Punch on the physical side, and that does good damage to stuff like Talonflame. You have Vacuum Wave on the special side, which is going to be awesome for hitting Lycanroc, Zoroark, and even Kyurem Black. And then the last move slot, you run Gunk Shot. So if you can use that Salamence to break down the Skarmory and kind of the Gastrodon as well, that Toxicroak set could be very good. It's another pretty decent matchup for Kyurem Black. I know that you always like to point out the potential of Kyurem Black in Dan's matchups. But I think actually there's a couple of decent revenge killers for Kyurem. At least for like the sort of standard wall breaker sets. Like if it's a Scarf set, it's going to be a little bit different. But yeah, both the Mence and the Diancie are options for outspeeding Kyurem Black and hitting it with super effective stab. So like the more offensive threat that I would be scared of if I were in John's shoes would be Mega Manectric. Just because Decidueye and Diggersby are not going to be really amazing checks to Manectric. Like you can still hit very powerful Hidden Power Ices on those 2 Mons. And maybe it forces the Scarf Diggersby just because you do want a Mon that can outspeed and potentially revenge kill that Manectric. If the Toxicroak doesn't come for Dan, besides threatening with Mega Manectric, I think that a Calm Mind Florges could be very good. just because the recourse for that is pretty little. Like, you have just Magneton to have super effective stab versus the Florges. But I bet, not only could Florges take a Flash Cannon at +1 from even like an analytic boosted Magneton, it's got to do a good chunk of damage with HP ground to that thing. So it's definitely not going to be able to live 2 of those moves. And so, yeah, I think it's just pretty potent. Put Synthesis in the last slot, and it could be a pretty nice win con for Dan. Overall, we've got 9 of the 11 picks going in favor of Dan. I'm included amongst that, and so are the fans. But our 2 dissenters are going to be Jacob, as always, who is locking John in this matchup, and then you also are picking John in this matchup, Ben. What do you have to say about that?
Well, I had to go with John. Once again, I am in his front office and always help him look at the matchups and understand what's probably the best option. And when it came down to it, you brought up a few offensive threats that are pretty decent, but I was really looking at a Double Dance Diggersby. I felt like it was going to be slept on this matchup, and I feel like it could do work for him. If he's able to get the proper prediction, or at least just decent setup versus a Skarmory who's getting greedy with hazards or something, I feel like Diggersby could be a threat, especially if that Skarm doesn't bring Whirlwind. I think Diggersby, as long as it can set up, it might just be able to win. Yes, you do have the Intimidate Mega Manectric in the back, but I still like it's going to be doing enough work to at least you can have something else to clean up, such as Alakazam. So being very aware of that, and just John and Dan facing off so much, I also helped John break down how Dan has been playing in his recent battles, so I feel like I'm very confident in him in this matchup. Really skeptical at first, and it's always hard to vote against Dan, but I have to go with my boy John this week.
All right, Ben with the insider knowledge this week.
Oh,
good stuff.
And for the next game, we have the Nuzleafs going up against the Milwaukee Bewares. This is going to be a battle between Automatic and Wolfie Glick. For this match, I'm going to be looking at a Savage Spinout Excadrill that could easily break apart the walls in Slowbro or Tangela, and then basically Excadrill just wins. So you have the Savage Spinout X-Scissor, and then you have Swords Dance, which you could potentially freely get off versus some of that bulk, or if you scare out one of the easy or the strong offensive checks that are pretty frail on the Nuzleafs. And then, of course, you have your Stabs and Earthquake and Iron Head in the back. Just basically deal with the entire rest of the roster. Excadrill is just a big threat for them. I've been using Excadrill a lot lately in my own leagues, and it's just an amazing Pokemon, so I definitely see its strong offensive presence in this match, especially in Sand. Because when it comes down to it, yes, there are decent offensive threats or potential on the Nuzleafs, but their speed is, yes, pretty good, and their offense is decent, but all of those Pokemon are frail and just drop to Excadrill in general. The only thing that's taking one hit from Excadrill is going to be Latios. So Salazzle could die to, honestly, like a Mud Slap. Not really, but either way, that thing's dropping any ground type move. Raikou's getting one-shot by Earthquake. Cobalion, unless it's like a Shucka set, or you are able to do something else, it's dying to an Earthquake either way as well. Ian Mega, I don't even think would take an Iron Head from like an Adamant Life Orb set, so you have to be very aware of that, because that's just the only offensive presence the Nuzleafs have on their team. I really don't like how strongly divided their team is between offense and bulk. It's just not the best support. I also strongly look at Gengar in this matchup. I really love Gengar in general. It just blows apart their walls. Honestly, Volibee is just trying to switch into the Gengar, and if you want to abuse that and you don't want to bring Xeon Excadrill and just do Life Orb just for the most damage possible, then you can just bring Thunder Xeon Gengar and Volibee's gone, and then Gengar literally just clicks moves. You can also bring a Scarf Gengar to ensure you outspeed Latios, unless it brings Scarf Latios itself. But other than that, Gengar's really just be clicking Shadow Ball and maybe Sludge Wave at certain times, because the only steal is Cobalion. And it's just going to be getting off a lot of chip versus the Nuzleafs, and there's honestly almost nothing they can do about it. Gengar is a tremendous wall breaker, and if it's able to get off a lot of chip for Excadrill, I'm going to say that's GG. There's definitely a lot of Pokemon that could catch them off guard and still be like potential threats. I could definitely see Mega Blastoise doing something, because Wolfie Glick's been doing amazing with that as of late. You really don't have a check with that. Probably the best one might just be Clefable, in all honesty, but Clef is once again easily pressured by Gengar and Excadrill. So it's easily in Wolfie's favor. I do think Automatic has been doing pretty well so far into the season. I know he's a respectful battler as well, but when it comes down to Wolfie, this is his league and he's been doing well. He's been doing amazing with his team in general, so I can't go against him. And neither can anyone else, because this is a full sweep for the Milwaukee Bewares this week. We have 2 lock-ins for JB Westside and Uzi Gunner as well, while you guys at home decide to vote in favor of Wolfie Glick.
Yeah, I don't have too much to add to your analysis. I like Otto as a person and as a battler, but I don't think this is the matchup for him. Volibee is sort of like the biggest threat, just because like Wolfie is lacking some important stab options to wear down Volibee, like Electric and Fairy. But he can wear that thing down with enough time if he gets up rocks, and he can hit with like Sludge Waves on Gengar and Iron Heads on Excadrill and stuff like that. I do think that Wolfie will end up taking this game. The next matchup is going to be between the South Texas Sableyes, coached by Invivid Color, and his opponent is going to be the Rochester Ride-ons, coached by Iron Boffin. Now, I know Iron Boffin's been having a pretty tough go of it this season. I've talked to him, and he said that he doesn't really like his team. He doesn't think it's very robust. But I think that this is actually a pretty good matchup for him. So much so that where I was leaning Vivid based upon just the records, when I looked at the Mons, I decided to go in favor of Boffin instead. The number one most threatening Pokemon, I think, is going to be Suicune. I really like Sub-Protect Suicune this week. And you can put Scald, of course, in the next slot, and then the final slot, do either Calm Mind or Toxic. Probably Toxic, just because that's the best way to beat Vivid's best response to it, being Poliwrath. I really like Sub-Protect this week because it does allow Suicune to stall out Thunder from Galvantula, which is like really the only... that's kind of like the best option for dealing with Coon. You of course have Tapu Bulu there as well, but like that's also not going to necessarily win in the long run. If you can get off a Toxic versus that thing, you can Sub-Protect and stall the thing out. And if it wants to go for Wood Hammers versus you instead of like Horn Leeches, it's going to end up hitting itself with Recoil in the long run. So I think that's a really, really threatening option this week. I mentioned Poliwrath being a pretty decent check to Coon. But yeah, like I said, Toxic is a pretty good way to beat that 1v1. And Poliwrath is just a little bit tough this week because I think it's a liability versus a lot of Boffin's team. You've got stuff like Jolteon, Shaman, Staraptor, Altaria, Metagross, all with super effective stab options for hitting Poliwrath. Poliwrath is one of my favorite low-tier waters, don't get me wrong, but I just don't think this is the matchup you want to bring it, which again makes that Suicune all the more threatening. I also like the checks that Iron Boffin has to most of Vivid's threats. Hawlucha is always a great threat in every matchup, but I think that there's a couple of decent checks to it, being the Mega Altaria, the Spirit Tomb, and even Metagross to an extent, just with its giant natural Fizz Def. For the Bulu, you've got like Metagross and Shaman, which aren't going to care too much for Horn Leech or Wood Hammer. And then Weavile checks both of those Mons pretty well offensively. It checks like Nidoking offensively, Mew offensively. Just make sure you don't sleep on something like Vacuum Wave Mew to deal with a Weavile. So yeah, a lot of the best offensive options for Vivid I think are kind of mitigated. His best choice might be Rock Polish Aggron. He brought that to great success versus K-Cray earlier in the season, but we'll have to see if he chooses to bring that or not. The Aggron is kind of the best response to Weavile on Vivid's team, so if he doesn't bring that defensively, he might just die straight up to Weavile, so we'll see how that one goes. The analysts and fans are going to be leaning mostly in favor of Vivid. There's 8 total votes going for them, and then there's 3 of us holdouts for Iron Boffin. Besides myself, it's Chris Cobain and Kresselkey. But yeah, so you're going in favor of Vivid in this game, it looks like, Ben.
Even though Bob has picked up a win this season, it's only been one, and it was a really close match. And overall, I'm more comfortable in Vivid's team and how well he's been doing, even though it's still like kind of 50-50 for Vivid, I believe, for his record. He's still an overall more experienced coach and has been playing more recently than the Ride-ons. Boffin has, of course, taken a long break before this season, and it's shown a little bit in some of his playthrough. Even though, yes, that kind of like protects Stally Suicune that Suicune's known for, I feel like Boff isn't really comfortable bringing that kind of set for Suicune, so I feel like that might not benefit him too well. I just feel like overall Vivid's going to be doing a decent time still with this team. He's being pretty creative with the past few sets, especially with that like the Rain Dance Hawlucha that he brought with the Belly Drum Poliwrath recently. That was amazing, and maybe he might be able to pull something off like that versus Boffin, and I feel like he'd be able to catch him off guard pretty easily. For the next match, we have the Tennessee Trubbish, coached by Definitely I Am, going against the Milwaukee Sawsbucks and Magnitude. For this match, I'm definitely looking at Thundurus putting in a beating. You The only thing they really have to be aware of as a designated counter is probably going to be a Trace Gardevoir to trace the Volt Absorb and come in on that electric type move. Yes, you do still get Sludge Wave to hit the Gardevoir, so you'd have to be aware of that. But if it's like a nice AV Gardevoir, it's definitely still taking one Sludge Wave, unless it's able to be like a nasty Plot Thunders, for example. So definitely a decent check with Trace. Hopefully the Sawsbucks will be aware of that and don't just try to click an electric type move straight up turn 1. Because there honestly isn't the best ground types when it comes to the Trubbish. Yes, you have Gligar, but so what? You're going to click Hidden Power Ice, and that thing's not really a threat versus Thundurus in general. It's going to get 2 KO by Hidden Power Ice, and even if it's Spadef, I'm pretty sure it gets 2 KO'd. And you're just going to be able to click it twice. Honestly, Gligar can't really do too much about it. It's going to try and install as much as it can, but it's not going to be too amazing. But for other offense on for the Trubbish, you have HP Flying Greninja. I feel like is actually going to put in a decent amount of work. Really difficult for them to switch into that because one, if you give it a rain boost, then you're asking for no switch-ins at all, and you're just going to be taking a whole bunch of damage. So really skeptical about rain this week in all honesty. I still think Swampert is only iffy in this matchup. It's got a few good things I can compare against, but as long as there's a bulky Celesteela as well as Kafakarigus where you hit it and it just negates Swift Swim, then something can easily come in and revenge it and everything like that. So I don't think Swampert has the best matchup, and Rain in general might just be a good option not to bring, so you don't give Greninja that boosted like Hydro Pumps and stuff like that, or even Surfs in general, because you just have nothing to switch into that, especially with Hidden Power Flying to hit the Chestnut. That's just going to be absolutely brutal for the Sawsbucks this week. Greninja always being a decent mon, even with its kind of average special attack stat, just its coverage, and easily boosted by Life Orb and everything of the sort, puts in work majority of weeks. I also see, if not just a bulky Celesteela, a special Autotomized Celesteela could definitely put in work, because it does get like the grass coverage to hit things such as the Mega Swampert and the Politoed. You can also run Hidden Power Fire to hit the Scizor, and you can, of course, have your Flying Stab to hit Pokemon such as the Chestnut. So you probably need to get rid of Thundurus before any shenanigans with Celesteela, but I definitely feel like it still has potential, because I feel like if you get up Stealth Rocks and you try to pressure Thundurus the best you can, maybe with Gardevoir, and just get off that chip with like Moonblast and then try to get Rock Switch-ins or something of the sort, you are able to potentially win with Celesteela, and it's something to look out for. Don't always stop a sweeper just because of one Pokemon. You're easily able to get rid of that and make that your win con 1,000,000%. So when it came down to the votes this week, I actually decided to go with the Tennessee Trubbish, and definitely I am. Majority of the analysts actually going in favor of the Sawsbucks. UCJ agreed with me in the Tennessee Trubbish as well as Griselke this week, while the fans at home decided to vote in favor of the Sawsbucks. CJ, why did you join me this week for definitely?
Yeah, it's when you're it's kind of hard to pick in these sorts of situations where both coaches are kind of at the edge of what could be considered a lost season or not. Like, they basically have to rip off an undefeated streak to the rest of the season all the way to the end in order to make playoffs. So you kind of have to like wonder what's the motivation level for each of these coaches. I know Steve likes to bust out the heat when he gets into these types of situations. I'm just hoping that maybe Deathly is a little bit more desperate for a win than Steve is, and he can really turn it up. Maybe he brings, like a bulky Celesteela set. You brought up like a specially offensive variant with Autotomize, which is definitely good, but like even just like a sub variant with Leech Seed I think is very good. It helps with stalling out weather and things like that. The only Leech Seed switch in is that Chestnut, but that obviously doesn't appreciate the Air Slash. You could be cheeky and run like Scarf Greninja as a way to maybe like outpace some of the like scary weather sweepers like Armaldo. I'm not 100% sure if it outspeeds Swampert or not. Maybe it depends on the nature. But yeah, I'm just hoping that Deathly pulls in a dub because he's a fun personality and I enjoyed interviewing him, and I'm hoping that he turns his season around a little bit. Now we're going to be going into my final matchup for this video. It's going to be between PokeMMD, aka Joey, and his Bronze Beartix. He's going to be going up against the Pittsburgh Pichus, coached by Numb Nexus. I mean, just right off the bat, you know, it has to be said, of course, that Joey is undefeated coming into this game, whereas Nexus has had a couple of pretty cool upsets this season, most notably versus A-Drive a few weeks ago, to make the most of his otherwise underwhelming team. But it's very interesting, like, just kind of looking at the matchups for Joey from week to week, because I think his team on paper isn't, like, the best. And, like, there's a couple of matchup issues in this game. Like, Mega Medicham in particular has no real responses on Joey's team. Like, normally you want to look for like a bulky Psychic type, or you want to look for like a Ghost type to try and deal with like a Mega Medicham. He doesn't have a Ghost type, and his Psychic type is Gothitelle, which doesn't really check it defensively. I mean, it goes without saying, of course, that Gothitelle can potentially trap a Medicham after it gets a KO and hit it with a Shadow Ball, and potentially eliminate it that way. I think that's really going to be the best recourse for him. But besides that, the best, like, quote-unquote switch-in is Volcarona, which is pretty hilarious. And then the best overall revenge killer is Comfey, which does have, you know, a good stab move in Draining Kiss, but Comfey just doesn't have a ton of immediate offensive power. So I don't know if it's going to be able to take out a Medicham from full. So we'll have to see how that goes. For like offensive options for Joey, like I'm saying, you know, maybe he doesn't have great defensive options for Medicham, but he has a couple of good offensive options. I think that like a offensive Piloswine actually is pretty decent. He can put enough EVs on it to outspeed Swampert and hit it with Freeze Dry. Obviously, it hits Tangrowth pretty hard with Icicle Crash. Depends on what sort of variant of Tangrowth he's going to bring, if he brings like a physically defensive or especially defensive. It takes out Doublade easily with EQ. It walls most Zapdos sets. Just kind of needs to watch out for a U-turn into Mega Medicham. So I like Pylo offensively in this game. And then like a main win con could potentially be Scarf Crocodile. You know, a pretty simple Moxie set. There's only 2 ground resists on Nexus's team and only 2 dark resists. So if he's able to eliminate those, or maybe he only brings like one of his dark resists, like maybe he benches Clefairy, you know, for example, because Clefairy is not necessarily a great option in most games. You know, so he does that, and then he gets rid of the Scun Tank. That paves the way for like a Scarf Crunch sweep. So yeah, I'm definitely leaning in favor of Joey this game. I just don't think it's necessarily like it's been in a lot of games. Isn't as straightforward as it would appear just based on the records. Just the thing with Joey, of course, is that his building skills and especially his battling skills are unparalleled. He can look at team preview and know exactly how his end game's going to play out, and that's not something that can be said of many of the other coaches in this league. So yeah, it's going to be a lot of coaches going in favor of Joey this week. The only dissenter is being Aaron, who is picking Nexus.
Yeah, I had to go in favor of Joey, of course. Once again, his building is just always phenomenal. His playstyle, he always knows exactly what's going to happen and how to prepare his endgame. And you don't have to worry about that Comfey, man. He's not going to let his Comfey go down. He will sack his life before he sacks Comfey.
Yeah, you're right about that.
Definitely have to be aware of that. But yeah, Joey, I feel like he's going to be doing pretty decent in this week for sure. And hopefully he can keep that undefeated record. And for the last match this week, we have the Free State Tourcats, coached by Duncan Kent Dye, going up against the New York Marauders and Mr. Talent. For this game, offensive Mega T-Tar is absolutely terrifying. You're definitely going to have to keep that Buzzwole healthy in the back and a designated check for this thing. When it comes down to maybe just a bulky Scarf, Buzzwole might be helpful because it also really helps deal with a D-Dance Mega Tyranitar, which could be pretty annoying. I'm not sure if T-Tar gets Aerial Ace coverage. It might, because Gen 1, Gen 2, typically they do. But still, a very terrifying Pokemon nonetheless. You don't really have the best things to switch in it. Bulky Audino is decent, but that's still not going to be doing like anything back to Mega T-Tar in all honesty. Empoleon could sit out there a little bit and do some damage, but once again, still not doing too much. In the long run, Mega T-Tar is going to put in the hurt, especially if you get a free switch in versus a Pokemon such as Latios. That's going to be not the best option to keep out too often. But as for some of the other things, a Scarf Circuitry for the Free State Tourcats can be pretty important because it also provides a instant check to a Dragonance Gyarados. Of course, a max speed Scarf Circuitry is going to be able to outspeed a max speed +1 Gyarados after a Dragonance, as well as just giving you very solid pivot and chip, especially if they decided not to bring that Stunfisk, because Stunfisk, even though it is a pretty solid Electrocheck and I do enjoy it as a low tier Pokemon, it's not always the most ideal Pokemon to bring. And even though it could be decent in a few things, getting in Zygarde for free or Tyranitar can even still do enough versus Stunfisk. It's just going to be pretty annoying. Even though I do feel like it has a presence, if it doesn't come, Circuitry gets off plenty of momentum and chip overall on the team to be pretty annoying for the Marauders roster. it does also get the energy ball coverage in order to hit the Stunfisk, so you do have to be aware of that. So it is able to deal with it in some manner. Gourgeist is one of the best switch-ins when it comes to Zydog. In fact, one of the best. I literally just... Okay, Ben. Just cut out that second part.
Sure.
Could also be a Colbur on the Gourgeist in order to deal with a potential Wisp on T-Tar, where you take a Crunch, or you catch him on Dragonite setup, something of the sort, and you're able to get off a free Will-O-Wisp. That's going to be very important, because wearing down T-Tar I feel like is going to be pretty important. Apart from that, I feel like Jirachi could be pretty nice to help out with the Latias and stuff like that. Iron Head flinching is always potential, but in the long run, I feel like I named kind of the biggest threats. Blacephalon could honestly actually be a decent threat now that I'm looking at it. They can do a decent amount of chip to at least break it down for T-Tar or something of the sort. But when it came down to it this week, I had to go in favor of Mr. Talent and the New York Marauders. Pretty split between the analysts. It looks like it's 50-50. And for the fans at home, y'all decided to go with the New York Marauders and Mr. Talent. CJ, you want to tell me why I decided to go with Duncan this week?
Yeah, I think just in general, there's better win cons coming out of Duncan's side. Something that would be really cheeky is like an Assault Fist Jirachi with Power Up Punch. Because then you can take hits pretty easily from the biggest threats like Nihilego and Latias, but then still find ways to boost. Like Iron Head is pretty good versus the majority of the team, but then you run like Drain Punch to hit like Empoleon and Houndoom. Maybe you run T-Punch for the Gyarados. I think that Jirachi has a lot of potential there. Zygarde 10% with like Sub Protect Toxic. I've mentioned that as a win con for Duncan in the past. I think that that's very good here. It's going to be able to easily wear down Gourgeist and Buzzwole. I think that maybe Drew can come up with something cheeky. Like there's maybe some cool win cons. Like he's brought lots of crazy stuff like Agility and Empoleon this season. Maybe he brings like some sort of Houndoom set with Sucker Punch, which is a really good option for outspeeding like Jirachi and Blacephalon, both those being weak to the Dark types. I think Houndoom gets Howl as like a setup option. Which would be like pretty unconventional, but actually be pretty nice in this situation. Yeah, it does get Howl. So maybe he cooks something up like that. But even the Houndoom, like, is it going to be able to break down Mega T-Tar without some sort of fighting coverage? We'll have to see. It does get Iron Tail, but it's not going to be that powerful versus the Tyranitar. Basically, I think Duncan's got better options. Alright, everybody. That's going to wrap up our analysis for the Week 8 Pick'em crew. We really enjoyed breaking down these games for you guys. We hope that you enjoyed listening to them. If there's any other cool sets or cool matchups you'd like to point out, make sure you leave it down in the descriptions below. Make sure you vote in the Twitter poll, like I mentioned, if you want to make your voice heard in terms of who's going to win each game each week. Ben, why don't you bring us through some plugs to wrap this video up?
Always here with the plugs on standby. Of course, make sure to go check out every coach in this league. They are doing amazing so far in the season. They really appreciate y'all's support. Make sure to go drop a sub and like and comment for their recent match video, as well as to make sure to check out their team builders so you know what their big brains are thinking coming into these matches, because some are doing amazing this season, doing a very job well in their prep, so give them some kudos for that one. As well as you would like to support the coaches even further in the league, you can always grab a t-shirt with your favorite team logo or the WBE logo on as well down in the description. Those shirts are looking beautiful, and you can definitely grab one for yourself and be the coolest kid on the street. Don't forget it. Also, make sure to check out the Pixelmon servers down below. They are doing very well, and they are a great time for many of the Pokemon fans out there. So take a look into it, because Minecraft is back on the rise as of recent. So definitely want to be once again, the coolest kid on the block. So, not saying all the children, y'all are all beautiful people. Oh god, cut that out again too.
Sure.
But apart from that, that's all I got to say for this week. Thank you guys once again for the continuous support. Let us know anything down in the comments. We do appreciate it. And that's going to be it for this week's CJ, if you want to say bye to the people.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you guys. Make sure you tune in again next week as we break down the next week of games. And yeah, this season, let's hope that it finishes us off real strong with all your support. So thank you very much. Until the next time, we'll see you all later.
Deuces.
Peace.